Hello everybody and welcome back to another video. It's been a few days since the conclusion of Stage 1 in both NA and EMEA for the OWCS this year, and so I wanted to do a little video just giving my thoughts on it, my overall kind of opinions and feelings, and giving you my little breakdown of the events that took place during this tournament. Going to start, of course, talking about the EMEA side, and then we'll jump over to NA in the second half of this video. Got a few headlines I want to cover, just give my overall thoughts on, so let's jump in and let's get started. I'm going to throw up the bracket for the EMEA side real quick, so you can just see it, see what happened at the end of it. As you can see, no real surprise at the end that it was Twisted Minds that walked away from the EMEA main event victorious over ENCE. ENCE, of course, formerly Bubo Spray Check, now ENCE. So, very, very, very good run for both of those teams. Obviously, ENCE won in the upper bracket final, Twisted Minds with the big win in the grand final. Very close game, very close series, very close, tournament for those two teams. But at the end of the day, it was Twisted Minds that continues to dominate this EMEA region. It's definitely close. I don't think that there's reason to suspect that ENCE won't be able to continue to compete at a high level with Twisted Minds. I think that there's certainly reason to believe that both of these teams are the top two teams in this region. I think it's going to be a pretty solid run for both of those teams going forward. But massive shout out to Twisted Minds and ENCE both for just a great tournament. Both teams played very, very well. Seeing the upper bracket final be a pretty one-sided win score-wise for ENCE, and then Twisted Minds dominating them in the grand final, it was very, very interesting. Just a very interesting kind of note, an interesting thing to see. I think Twisted Minds really has lots of really good things going for them that has helped. I think the synergy they've had now for several years ultimately is one of the things that has helped them win this game. I think as time goes on, I suspect ENCE will probably overtake them if they can really kind of finalize the synergy of their roster. I know that they've made a move, at least from what it seems. They've made an addition to their roster, bringing in Chase from Oblivion to be one of the tanks for their team, which would open up their tank pool to be more kind of diverse in terms of and let them play dive tanks a little bit better. So that's something to keep an eye on, of course. But I really thought that this was a very, very good run for both of these teams, right? But Twisted Minds ultimately takes it. They have been a dominant force in EMEA contenders, in the World Cup, in whatever it is. This core of players has been phenomenal for a very long time. Over a year of just pure dominance here in this region. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens when they have to go up against teams like Falcons in Korea or Toronto Defiant in North America, some of these other really top-level teams, or WAC in Korea as well. How do they stack up against some of those opponents? We'll see when the time comes. But I've been quite impressed by what we've seen from both of these rosters, Twisted Minds and ENCE. But it was just a better performance in the grand final from Twisted Minds. They were, as a team, were just able to really kind of clutch up and solidify their spot once again. It's the most they've had to work for a while. I saw a tweet that this is the first time in a while that Twisted Minds had to go in through the lower bracket. Like, they never lose games. So the loss to ENCE was their first loss in a long time. In Pro-Am competition. So this is a very, very, very good team that will continue to look very good. I think that more so than North America, EMEA is a very competitive region. I think that there's more opportunity for a team like ENCE to overtake Twisted Minds as we move forward, but it'll be interesting to see as we go forward kind of what happens there and what happens in the next tournament here in a few weeks. But let's move on to the next thing I want to talk about, which I mentioned a little bit. I mentioned Oblivion. That's where Chase was taken from for ENCE, but Oblivion actually had a very good tournament run. I had a feeling they would be a good team. I mentioned it. I thought they were one of the top 5 teams in this region. Maybe they were the 4th or the 3rd best. It was unclear at the time, but what we see from them is that they were a very solid team. They opened up the tournament with a 3-0 victory over ROC Esports, a team that I thought would be pretty good. ExO easily defeated them, took a map off Twisted Minds, swept Peps, beat Space Station Gaming, and then once again took a map off Twisted Minds, but lost that series. But they had a very good run. They are a team that I would say across both regions, NA and EMEA, I will say that I think ExO was the single most impressive team of any team in the entire tournament. And it's not necessarily because I didn't think they were good. I thought they were good. They are significantly better than I thought. And I thought they really did put themselves in a solid position. Now, they did lose Chase. They're going to lose a tank player. How do they bounce back from that? How do they fix that? Do they bring somebody in to replace him? You know, there's certainly questions about that and how you perform when that is the situation at hand. But I'm very interested to see in what ExO does going forward, because I thought that Shockwave looked good. But even more than Shockwave, I was incredibly impressed by Cookie, who was a very, very, very good DPS player who did very well. Cloud looked pretty good as well whenever he got to play. But I thought Cookie and Shockwave, those two, really did a lot. And I thought that they were incredibly consistent in the way that they played. And I love that for Shockwave. He's a player who's been kind of up and down for a little while. He's had his moments towards the top, but also has had some pretty poor luck when he was in the Overwatch League. So really nice to see him have somewhat of a bounce back here, and just see him perform as well as he has is always nice to see. Really, really, really good run from this ExO team, right? Including a win over a Space Station Gaming team that we've all kind of collectively felt very, very highly of. I think SSG is probably going to be fine. I think that this meta is just not the best for them. I think the fact that EMEA played a lot of Mauga, but then also there was some like Winston and some dive stuff like that I just don't think is SSG's strength. I think that they struggle in SSG, or they struggle in these dive metas. They struggle when they don't get to play the rush style compositions. That's just their bread and butter. It's what they're the best at. It's not to say that they're a bad team, right? It was a 3-2 loss to ExO that ultimately eliminated them. ENCE did dominate them, but I think SSG is a good team. I just think that they're not in their best meta. They also, even in the Overwatch League, the London Spitfire roster that this core is made up of, always, for the past several years, took time to get going. They were always kind of mid, if not just like bad at the beginning of the season, and then would just really kind of ramp it up later in the year. And so maybe they have a much better second half of the season. I think that they are in a pretty good position to at least finish, top 3, right? Like they're 4th right now, but I think depending on what happens with the meta and if there's shifts in the meta, could they get a top 3 finish in the next tournament? Absolutely. Especially if ExO is not able to find a good replacement for Chase. So it's a thing, but little mini kind of diversion from the course. But I was very impressed by ExO. I think ExO really was one of the teams that impressed me throughout both regions the most. And I'm excited to see what they do going forward with their new tank situation. How do they bounce back? How do they solve that? They're one of the organizations that is a long-standing European Overwatch organization. But at this point, it comes down to what do they have going for them as we move into the next stage. They have to make changes. They don't necessarily have the money that something like Twisted Minds has or ROC has. And so how do they make it work? We'll see. But I was very impressed by the team, and I think that they're going to continue to look pretty good as we go forward. Next, we have the team that I was most disappointed in the entirety of this tournament, and that is ROC Esports. I thought this team would be pretty good. Saudi Arabian core, some players that have been very, very, very highly touted coming out of Saudi Arabia. especially Rojo, the DPS player, but then also they have Checkmate and Izayaki, two Overwatch League champions on this roster, and they were just mollywopped in this tournament. 3-0 swept by ExO. It was a decently close series, but ExO ultimately victorious. And then a 3-0 sweep loss to Quick Esports, which just boggles my mind. Quick is not a great team, right? Quick got 3-0'd by Twisted Minds and got 3-0'd by Space Station, and neither of those series were particularly close. It was a pretty one-sided affair in both of Quick's losses. And so the fact that they were able to 3-0 ROC, to me, is just quite a fascinating thing to look at. I don't really know what the downfall of ROC was. I don't know what happened. I don't know why they did not look that good. There's a lot of questions about it. But I just think that they were one of the most disappointing teams the entire weekend. I don't know how you can have a team like that with some of those players and lose every single map you play and just get completely eliminated that quickly. It genuinely boggles my mind because there is talent on that ROC Esports roster. And look, I like Quick Esports. I've talked about it in the past. I think they have some good players, some players that I rate somewhat highly, like Don and Shax. But they're not a great team. They're a good team. They have good players, but they're not competing at the level of some of the players on ROC who have just been very good, both in Overwatch League and Saudi E-Leagues and all of these other things. To get 6-0 swept is really, really shocking. And I'm really interested to see how they go into the next tournament. Will they make any changes, or will they just say, hey, look, we had a bad weekend. We had a bad day. It was not our best day. We had a bad game. Maybe we had problems. I don't know about. I haven't seen any reports about it. But I was very disappointed in the way they played, and I think that they're a team that should have higher expectations for themselves. And so to lose the way they did, to walk away from this tournament getting fewer points than Quick Esports is just wild, especially for a team that won their group in dominant fashion. We all kind of thought their group was maybe a little weak and not that good. It seems like that was very much true, and that ROC just did not have what we would have expected from them. So, disappointing from them. Not really much else to say. I just think that I wanted to talk about them a little bit because I thought their run was quite disappointing from most metrics. They just did not do much, if anything at all, well. Let's move on now to North America. Once again, not a huge shocker there in terms of what happened. I'll throw up the bracket so you can see the full extent of the NA bracket. You can see Toronto Defiant ultimately stood tall at the end of things and won the tournament. Not really surprising. Now, slight surprise in terms of how some of the other games went and how they went, but they were not really challenged much outside of the upper bracket semis versus Timeless, and then they lost one map in the first round to LFO, but outside of that, it was clean. 3-0 over M80 in the upper bracket finals, 4-0 over Timeless in the grand finals. This team's really good. I think they are probably, dare I say, one of the best looking teams in the league. I think that they are really, really, really doing a number of things well. They have some really good players. Obviously, they're the best tank player in the world right now in someone. They have phenomenal DPS players in Sugar Free and Merit, and they have arguably the best American support line you can make with Vega and RuPaul. It's a perfect storm for this team. They're very good. I think that right now the only teams that really could potentially challenge them are teams in Korea. Right now, I'd put them ahead of Twisted Minds. As good as Twisted Minds looks in the EMEA region, I think that the high-end talent in North America has just looked better, and I think when you put two Korean superstars on this team and you pair them with arguably the three best players that the U.S. has produced in recent years, I don't really think there's much competition outside of Korea. And I even think there's a very real possibility that the Defiant could compete with and beat some of your top teams in Korea, right? 2 teams make it out of Korea. Do I think this team can compete with Falcons and WAC? Potentially. I think that they certainly have the players for it. I think they have the players in the most important roles. I think that HitScan is really interesting to look at in Korea in particular, because I don't think there's a lot of great HitScan talent active in Korea right now. So Merit might be the best HitScan player active in the game outside of maybe Lip. So this Defiant roster is really, really good. And the fact that they dominated the way they did against some very solid rosters in M80 and Timeless is really, really impressive. And I think that the Defiant should still be the favorites to not only win North America, but to potentially even do damage as they move into the overall, kind of DreamHack stage once we go into Dallas. I think that the Defiant look really good. I think that they should be one of the teams that we all look at as potentially, legitimately one of the top teams in the world. I have not watched as much Korea as I would like to, but I've been following along as best I can, and I'm impressed by what we've seen from Korea, but I actually think the Defiant have the means to compete quite well with a lot of those teams, and so I think we're looking like the Defiant could actually be one of the top 3 teams in the world at this current moment, and I think that they have shown quite a lot of flexibility and just ability to compete at the top, and so I'm very excited to finally get to see some of that international competition later on this year and see how the Defiant match up against some of those other top teams over there. But let's talk about the more interesting sides of North America, because as good as the Defiant are, we all knew they'd be as good as they were. But really, I think the most impressive run in North America goes to Timeless. Now, we all knew Timeless was a good team. We all had feelings that Timeless could make a pretty good run in this tournament, whether it be getting a top finish or not would be kind of based on how they did. But they managed to finish in second, making it to the grand finals against the Toronto Defiant. And in doing so, they got wins over some very respectable teams. They beat a Students of the Game team that I thought played very well against Timeless. Obviously, Students of the Game is the roster that has Rack Attack and PGE and Infected and Scissors and Cal. That team is very solid. They're a very strong team. I think they're going to be picked up largely in their current state by an org moving forward. I think they looked really, really good. And I think they had a very good game against Timeless, but Timeless was able to win that one. Timeless is then able to 3-0 Luminosity. They beat M80 in the lower bracket finals before eventually losing to the Defiant. Oh, and they also had a very close 5-map series in their first meeting against the Defiant in the upper bracket. They were pushed a bit by Pirates in Pajamas, who I thought were actually a pretty good team as well. They had some pretty good performances this weekend. They surprised me a bit as well and impressed me a bit. But Timeless is really, to me, kind of the harbingers of the new era of young players in Overwatch. There's some really, really, really good talented players. Rocket, Chopper, phenomenal North American DPS players. Pair that with Sonjun, someone we've seen compete a bit in the Overwatch League for the Seoul Dynasty last year. Comes now here. You have Riker and Icy as your tanks. Icy's been around for a while, but Riker's a name I was not familiar with before this tournament kicked off. And then you have a support duo of Opener and CJ, both of whom have had some time in the Overwatch League. CJ played on the LA Valiant last year. Did not obviously have a great run on that team, but was on that team. And Opener, of course, has been around for a while. Was on I believe ended on the Defiant last year. Played on Washington Justice, I think, for a time. So he had a pretty good run as well, a bit in the Overwatch League. So there's some Overwatch League talent on this team, but the real kind of stars of this show are really Rocket and Chopper, and I think their tank duo not having Overwatch League experience. This is really a team where the core of this team has been together for a while as a part of the Wisp roster before. Now they come in and they look really, really good. And I think when you consider the fact that they beat a team like M80 that was full of Overwatch League veterans, and they beat a team like Luminosity that once again has a lot of Overwatch League veterans like King and Dante and Luke Mino, it's really impressive to see what they were able to do as a roster, just to see how good they were. And they were able to beat some teams that I don't think many people would have expected them to beat going into this tournament. I was impressed by them going into the tournament. I thought their victory over M80 in the group stage was impressive enough as it was. But they, to me, are really, really, really solidifying themselves as one of the top teams. And I think, Jake has talked about this a lot on both Plat Chat and on broadcast and on his own kind of platforms. But the fact that the Overwatch League happened, generally speaking, and widely, and broadly kind of in North America, meant that North American talent has gotten to really develop their game quite a lot as they're playing ranked and they're playing on ladder against all this really high-end Korean competition, and all the best players in the world, generally speaking, are coming to the U.S. and they're competing in the U.S. And so I think that has really helped cultivate and grow this American scene quite a lot. And so what we're seeing is that North America has really developed a lot of really high-end talent. In particular, I think DPS talent in North America is really, really good. And you can get DPS players in North America that are as good, if not better, than some of your Korean DPS talent. I still think that tanks, Korea is still, I think, ahead of the curve there. And I think that on support, we're seeing American support play get better, but I still think Korea has the edge there as well. But in particular on DPS, I think American DPS players are phenomenal. And I think as the game moves in a direction where DPS players have higher impact, you can see teams like Timeless, when you have really solid DPS players like Rocket and Chopper, you can see them really start to impress and look a lot better and do a lot better going forward. So I love what we've seen from this team. I think this team is phenomenal. I think they're so good. I think they're only going to get better from here. I'm curious to see kind of how some of these roster shakeups affect some of these teams. Like we've seen M80 has already lost Renko, and Spectra's leaving that team, and I believe Hydron might also be leaving M80. So Seeker might be joining that team. So there's definitely things to look at as you kind of look across North America broadly and how the scene is developing there. But Timeless to me is one of those teams that they've been together for a while, and I think they should hopefully survive some of this change in roster and some of these roster shakeups, because I think they've just been a solid core that you don't really expect to break up. So shout out to them. I think they are one of the best organizations we have in the Overwatch scene right now. They've been dominating in Calling All Heroes. They've been dominating now in the OWCS, and I think we're seeing that they're really good at investing into the right talent. Obviously, they did take the Wisp roster, but there's still a lot of credit to be given to what they've been able to do in general as a roster. The final headline I want to talk about here is the Sad Tale of LFO. This team with a lot of great players on it that obviously kind of came together late in the game. Basically they had to change the starting date and time for the first stage because they didn't actually have all the stuff in place after the M80 blow up and all that type of stuff. So the team obviously never really got to be as good as we kind of hoped they would be. Things were kind of all over the place, and we're seeing that the players are all kind of going their own way. But it is unfortunate when you just consider just the high-end talent on this team. Players like Seeker and Top Dragon and Zero looked really good on a DPS line. We've seen what Liar can do in the Overwatch League. I think that they were an imperfect roster. Obviously, they never had the time to fully get what they wanted to do. I think that they've always been struggling to really get this team together where it needs to be. And so it's unfortunate to see that then, they got bounced quite quickly. They took a map off of the Defiant, which is very impressive for that part of the tournament. And then they lost to Pirates in Pajamas 3-2. Now, I think that I will say that I think their run was not as bad as what you got with ROC. I don't think ROC didn't have to play the best team in the world or in the region when they played ExO, right? LFO had to play Defiant, which is a tough game to play. LFO was always going to have to play through the lower bracket. There was really very little chance they would beat the Defiant. And they lost a close game to Pip. It wasn't like they got swept. So definitely more impressive or less disappointing than what happened with ROC, plus all the other factors around LFO and the fact that the roster never really got to be what they wanted it to be. It's unfortunate. I hope the best for all the players from this team. We know McGravy is coaching collegiate now. Shout out to that. Jump for him, obviously. Definitely more stable, more suitable there. And so I'm really excited to see what happens for some of these players, but it's unfortunate to see this team not get the success you would have wanted them to get, dissolve, and not really make it as far as you would have liked. But I'm hoping the best for all the players on this team, and I'm hoping that moving forward, they get to contribute in ways to other rosters. I think this opens up the path for another team to really kind of get a spot in that top 8 potentially. and potentially run forward. I think these players are probably going to disperse and join a variety of other places and not focus on this one team any longer. But it's unfortunate to see this all kind of blow up, considering the name value and some of the talent on this team. But that's going to be it for today. Those are all the things I wanted to bring up about the first stage for the OWCS here in North America and EMEA. Obviously, there's still stuff going on in Korea and in Japan and in the Pacific region, so we will get to those later on as we get closer and closer to the main event going on over in Asia. But for now, that is everything to talk about here. Moving forward, we're very, very close to stage 2 kicking off for North America and EMEA, so we don't have to wait a long time to get that underway. Very soon, we'll be back talking about things like it never changed. That's going to be all for me for today. If you enjoyed this video and want more like it in the future, consider liking it, subscribing, as your support does help out a lot with the channel. Comment down below your thoughts on anything that happened in NA or EMEA over the past couple of weeks. And, of course, I hope you're all staying safe and staying healthy. And until next time, bye-bye.